Hi there, it's me, Azaan, and welcome back to another episode of Azaan Reads. Let me sort out the camera. Okay. We're going to read Twitch again until we finish the book. Let's see where we were at last time. Right, Chapter 3, Aves Woods. The Aves Woods Nature Reserve was built on an old fly-tipping site. Rare plants grew there because fly ash from the coal mines had made the soil alkaline. If you hear a thingy noise, that's just the heater. And despite the name, not all of it was woodland. Some of it was meadow, and a large part of it was wetland. It was a city for insects, a fine dining experience for birds, and Twitch's favourite place in the whole world. You never knew what bird might visit the banks of the river Brid, or choose to nest around the pond, in the boggy swamp of the wetland. Twitch entered Aves Woods through a kissing gate. Besides the canal, which ran almost parallel to the river, immediately stepping off the footpath, he glanced about, checking no one had seen him, then dashed through the undergrowth, making his way towards the pond, inhaling the heady scent of pine resin and smiling to himself as he trod carefully over tree roots and badger setts, trying not to leave footprints that might lead anyone to his hide. As the ground became mushy and sodden, the trees thinned, and he saw the pond stretching out in front of him, its surface shimmering like a mirage in the heat. He heard the mouse-like squeak of an owl-catcher and scanned the reeds for the black and white wadder with the long orange beak. But the barking of dogs broke his concentration, and he dropped out into a squat, peering through a tangle of brambles. He saw two police officers being tugged along by a pair of excited Alsatians on leads. There were 10 or 11 There were 10 or 11 meters away. Off the footpath, Twitch was surprised. It was unusual to see the police in Aves Woods, and he'd never seen them with dogs. He sniffed the air, wondering if some of the college kids had started a fire but detected no smoke. Just a comforting, earthy fragrance of the woods. Circumnavigating the pond, wary of the deep pools of water around the bulrushes that masqueraded as solid ground, Twitch picked his way across a clearing towards a thicket of trees. Relaxing now, he knew he was hidden from the public paths by dense foliage and distance. A bone-shakingly loud thud drew his eyes to the sky as a police helicopter flew over, surprisingly low. Alarmed birds flushed from their nests in the tall socks around the water's edge, called out in distress. Feeling exposed, Twitch sprinted, ducking as he pushed his way into the shadowy copse. Ignoring the scratch of whip-thin branches, he glanced about nervously, his pulse galloping and his breath short. What were the police looking for? It was a shock to see people here. It was a scheduled part of the reserve because of the dangers of the waterlogged land. He stood shock still, watching the helicopter pass, waiting for the peaceful chirps and buzz of the woods to return. Reaching down to a green mass of unfurling fronds, Twitch released a coat hanger that was attached to a thin rope looping into the air. Oh! Reaching down to a green mass of unfurling fronds, Twitch released a coat hanger that was attached to a thin rope, looping up into a tree. As he pulled it, a flap of ferns lifted, revealing an opening low to the ground. Hooking the hanger over a branch, he dropped to all fours, crawling inside his hide. To the left of the door was the watching window, a wide rectangular pattern that could be propped open for bird watching. Twitch opened it and peered out. On the far side of the pond, he saw 3 sailing boats and officers in uniform aboard, wearing life jackets, poking about in the reeds. With long sticks, he thought about the headline on Billy's newspaper. Sliding his rucksack off, Twitch sat down on a blue plastic milk crate that served as a chair or a table and waited for his eyes to adjust to the shadows. In the middle of the floor, directly below the apex of the tipi, was a fire pit encircled with flints. One of the roof sections between the apex and the tree branch lifted up and flipped over, making a hole to let smoke out. But Twitch hadn't yet dared to light a fire, for fear it might attract attention. In the beginning, Twitch's hide was just a tipi of sticks built against an ancient beech that grew in a ring of complicated hazel trees whose roots had woven together to make firm ground. He constructed it to watch the wetland birds. Last summer, the tipi had expanded into a wild fort as Twitch's building plans grew more and more ambitious. Beyond the tipi room was a second space that he'd made watertight, so he might camp. The thingy sun's getting into my eyes. I think I'm gonna have a juice break for now. One sec. Alright, let's get back to the book then. I'll go back to in the beginning, okay? In the beginning, Twitch's hide was just a tipi of sticks built against an ancient beech that grew in a ring of occupied hazel trees whose roots had woven together to make a firm ground. He constructed it to watch the wetland birds. Last summer, the tipi had expanded to a wild fort as Twitch's building plans grew more and more ambitious. Beyond the tipi room was a second space he'd made watertight, so he might camp out there some night. It was the shape and size of a triangular two-man tent and constructed from a sheet of plastic thrown over a bough of the beech tree. It was walled in the branches, wedged into trenches in the ground and tied where they crisscrossed at the top. He filled the trenches with soil, banking it up to keep out of rivulets of rain, gapping the stuffed and leafy sticks and his woven fern fronds through them, plugging any hole with moss until the hide had blended in with the forest on all sides. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Okay. Unfortunately, the plants Twitch had used to camouflage his den had turned brown and crumbled. So at the end of last summer, he brought his spade to Abe's woods and dug up ferns, teasels, thistles, nettles, and brambles, replacing them around the hide. In the spring, as the brambles shot tendrils along the forest floor, he'd woven them into the external walls. The teasels shot up and thistles fanned out. The nettles multiplied. Together they created a line of defense. Spiky foot soldiers that kept away the curious with their arsenal of thorns and stings. Everything appeared to be as he'd left it, as last Sunday. Sweeping his hands across the earth floor, he moved a layer of dirt, exposing the top of the buried storage box. He popped off the lid. Inside was his bird-watching kit and an assortment of useful objects, including a red tartan cushion, dry kindling, an umbrella, a torch, a pair of gardening gloves, and a box of matches in a sealed sandwich bag. He put the fruit gums from Billy into the box and lifted out his most prized possession, a battered leather case that held his granddad's binoculars. The heavy spyglass evoked memories of quiet hours sat beside the kind old man he thought of as his dad, being taught the names of plants whilst learning to be patient. Patience, his granddad would always used to say, is the silent call that brings the owls, the hawks, and the falcons. Okay. Twitch hung the binoculars around his neck and crawled into a triangular room. Going to the back wall, he slid aside a stumpy branch, as if shooting a bolt, revealing a hole the perfect size for a spyglass. He slotted his binoculars into the gap and moved the dial between the lenses until the distant footpath came into focus. Something was happening in Abe's woods, and he wanted to know what it is. His view was patchy, obscured by tree trunks and thorny scrub. But there was 3 sections of the footpath that he could see clearly. He waited, calm and patient, and was rewarded by the sight of a woman in a suit, followed by a troop of officers in uniform. She was pointing, giving orders. The troops divided and dispersed. Twitch felt a lurch of alarm. The police were searching for someone or something in Abe's woods. Okay, now. Wait, did I go? Wait. Oh, there it is. What if they came here and discovered his hide? The summer would be ruined. He made his plans. Tomorrow he was going to begin training his squabs, Squeak and Fazzle. He planned to take them out on their maiden homing flight, then spend the rest of the day here, watching the wetland birds, updating his field journal, and making improvements to his hide. A flash of yellow caught his eye, and he retrained his binoculars. He blinked, surprised to see 2 girls hiding in the undergrowth, peering over a falling tree trunk at the footpath. The elder one had a waterfall of tight dark curls down her black and brooding elfin features. She was wearing jeans, a rainbow t-shirt, and carrying a plastic bag. The other girl, who looked a few years younger, had honey brown curly hair scraped into a puffball ponytail on top of her head. Now, she was wearing shorts with she was wearing shorts with a yellow net skirt over her top and a pink vest under a powder blue cross cardigan. She looked frightened, huddled up against the other girl. The 2 girls were alike enough for Twitch to guess they were sisters, but he couldn't hear what they were saying. But he could tell the other girl was reassuring the younger. Their expressions were serious, and their gestures were animated. Could the police be after them? There were too many people stomping about Abe's woods to watch birds, and Twitch was curious to know what was going on. Why was there so many police officers, dogs, and a helicopter in the nature reserve? Keeping his binoculars around his neck, he uncovered the storage box, sweeping the dirt back over it to keep it hidden. Pulling on his rucksack, Twitch left the hide, making sure it was secure. He decided to make his way round to the rabbit track that wove a thin path through the nettles towards the girls' hiding place and see if could find out what they were up to. And Chapter 4 we'll have to read in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode of Azaan Reads. Hopefully my Spider-Man Miles Morales series comes on Christmas, or the Spider-Man Miles Morales series will come. I'll start recording that on in December. But for now, we'll be reading Twitch. Goodbye.